So Psalm 35. Psalm 35 is one of a handful of what we would call imprecatory psalms, and that would be a psalm that really contains a bunch of curses. And what I mean by curses is David praying for things to happen to his enemies that we normally wouldn't pray. And I think I walked away this week, or I started this week with hoping to answer the question of should we as Christians, is this something we do now, right? Are we allowed to pray curses over our enemies? And I hope that we have come to that conclusion at the end of our time today. But I think that regardless of the answer to that question, we need to understand that at the core of this psalm that David wrote is a man who is bringing a incredibly difficult time and incredibly difficult emotions to fully comprehend to God, right? So God knows our hurt. God knows our struggle. He knows everything we're going through. He knows the thoughts that we think. And instead of trying to hide them, David just lays it all out for us in the book of Psalms to read and study through now. And I think it's good for us to practice that in the sense that we may as well expose to him our heart so that if we are in the wrong, that he can correct it, that he can encourage us, that he can be like, this time you're kind of wrong there, or whatever it might be. And so that's kind of how I started with there and where I came to. And so now let's dive into it and see what we can find out together. And we'll start in verse 1 through 3. It says this, "Plead my cause, O Lord, with those who strive with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of a shield and a buckler, and stand up for my help. And also draw out the spear and stop those who pursue me. Say to my soul, I am your salvation." So the first thing that David does in this psalm, and really in the first 10 verses, we're going to see that he's praying for protection. He's praying for protection from his enemies. Now, we can't be 100% certain, but it is highly, I would say, likely that this was written during the time when Saul was pursuing him, when he was being chased and Saul wanted his life because God had anointed him as king, and Saul did not want that to happen. And I think that regardless of if that was exactly the time that was written, that is more than likely the same feelings that David would have been feeling during that time. And so the first word that he uses here, he says, plead my cause with those who strive against me. It's this idea, it was a legal term, and really what he's asking God to do is contend on my behalf in the court of law, right? Defend me, defend my character, contend for me. And second, he says fight against those that fight against me. And he says to take up a shield and a buckler, which is also another shield. So he has two shields, and so he's saying, Lord, be my defense, right? Shields would be something that was used for defensive purposes. And in this picture, God has two shields, and he also asks him, take up a spear and fight my battles. Something that I had really no clue before this, but in Isaiah 59, verse 17, we actually see that God has armor. And I think that's something we don't necessarily think about all the time, but it says there in Isaiah 59:17, says of the Lord, for he put on righteousness as a breastplate and a helmet of salvation on his head. He put on the garments of vengeance for clothing and was clad with zeal as a cloak. And it's this, what David is praying for, and David was a warrior himself. And what David is praying for here is, and he's picturing God as a warrior. And what a powerful picture that is for us. That we have a God who is a warrior God. He's also one that will defend us in our character, but he's also one that will defend us in that capacity if needed. And we're going to see later in this chapter that David had people that were slandering his name, that were attacking his life. And so this prayer makes a lot of sense from David. Lord, protect me. Protect my life. But even with that knowledge that David had, right? David had a beautiful knowledge. We know that from the Psalms, just reading them. We know that David had a very deep and a beautiful understanding of who God was and his character and all these things. But even with that knowledge, if we notice in verse 3, he still had doubt. He still had doubt, even in the midst of having all that knowledge. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. David needed a reminder. And notice how in this psalm, in this prayer, if you will, that's kind of how I view it, more as a prayer than a song, but this prayer that David has to God, he's crying out to the Lord, and right away, in verse 3, he's like, Lord, I am doubting that you can do it. I'm doubting. And what that shows to us is just how humble David was. He wasn't going on and putting on a front, but he's just honest with God. This really is an honest psalm to God. Like, Lord, I'm struggling. Defend me, protect me, and I'm struggling to see that you will. I'm struggling to believe that you will. But what's interesting is I think that where this is located, in verse 3, it didn't stop his prayer, right? This moment of doubt didn't stop his prayer, but in fact, it increased the intensity of it. It increased the intensity at which he was praying. And I think that's really good application for us, is that it's okay for us to doubt. It's okay for us to fear. It's okay for us to struggle. But that shouldn't deteriorate or get us away from praying, but it should intensify our prayer. It should bring us to a place where we're praying with an even greater conviction. He continues on in verse 4. He says, let those, and this is the intensity, but let those be put to shame and brought to dishonor who seek my life. Let those be turned back and brought to confusion who plot my hurt. Let them be like chaff before the wind. Let the angel of the Lord chase them. Let their way be dark and slippery. And let the angel of the Lord pursue them, for which cause they have hidden their net for me in a pit, which they have dug without cause for my life. Let destruction come upon him come on him unexpectedly, and let his net that he has hidden catch himself into that very destruction. Let him fall. And so this is where I was talking about, as an imprecatory psalm, is one that has David is praying for bad things to happen to his enemies. And if you think this one is bad, just wait for. Not good at math. What's 109 minus 30? Or I don't know. At Psalm 109, there's like 30 verses of that. And I think if I'm up that day, I'll just be sick. And my dad can handle it. They're getting to celebrate their anniversary right now. So, that's enough. That's enough. He can do the next one. Psalm 109 is all him. But David is praying for things to happen. He says, God, destroy them, right? Let them fall into the traps that they have set for me. David is praying that his enemy would fall in the very traps that they had set for him. Now, I think for us, the very simple way we apply this is, yes, we can pray this prayer, because there is an enemy out there that is setting up traps for you and I. I think of Cain and Abel, and just how God said sin is crouching, it's waiting at your doorstep. Right? The enemy is laying traps everywhere, trying to ensnare us, trying to get us to fall into sin. And so it's okay for us to pray against the enemy and saying, Lord, protect me and destroy them. There's a spiritual fight that's going on that we can absolutely apply this to. And it might seem harsh, but if we remember that God was the one that appointed David to be king over Saul. God said, David is my new anointed. And so what we can glean from this is that the people that were going for Saul's life, or David's life, they were actually enemies of God, because they were going against his will. They knew that Saul was not a great person. They knew that he was not obeying the Lord. They knew that they knew all those things. And they knew that David was a good man and was the one that God desired. And yet, they were still choosing to torment him, to quite literally try to take his life. And so these people, although it's easy for us to be like, oh, these are just David's enemies, but in reality, they're enemies of God. They're going against what he has, what he says. And for us, what a blessing it is, on the other end of that, to be a child of God, to be somebody who is not an enemy of God. Like a father, God wants to protect his children. And he will. He will protect us. Maybe not in the way we think or how we always think is best, which can be hard. It can be difficult to trust in God's ways. But we, as children of God, have that same protection that David is praying for here. And it continues in verse 9 through 10. And my soul shall be joyful in the Lord. It shall rejoice in his salvation. All my bones shall say, Lord, who is like you, delivering the poor from him who is too strong for him? Yes, the poor and needy from him who plunders him. After each little section, David finishes the psalm with a praise of the Lord. And isn't it interesting how he's praying, he's praising the Lord for what? In light of the salvation, he hadn't experienced it yet. He hadn't been delivered from his enemies yet. But he had enough faith to know that he was going to be delivered, that God was going to see him through some way, even if that meant death, even if that meant bringing him to see him now. He knew that that was a glorious thing as well. What does David not do? He prayed for the destruction of enemies, but notice how he doesn't celebrate it. He doesn't pray, thank you, Lord, for destroying my enemies. He says, Lord, thank you for protecting me. Thank you for bringing salvation to me, and not only me, but the weak, the ones who can't protect themselves. David was not the only one being tormented in this time of his life. It was also other people that were being tormented on his behalf, his supporters, people that wanted him to be king. They were also being tormented and taken advantage of. In this next section, in verse 11 through 18, we see that something that's very important for us if we find ourselves in a position to be praying for the destruction of our enemies is that David was blameless. He was blameless before God and before his enemies. In verse 11 through 16, it says this, fierce witnesses rise up. They ask me things that I do not know. They reward me evil for good to the sorrow of my soul. But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer would return to my own heart. I paced about as though he were my friend or brother. I bowed down heavily as one who mourns for his mother. But in my adversity, they rejoiced and gathered together. Attackers gathered against me, and I did not know it. They tore at me, and I did not cease. With ungodly mockers at feasts, they gnashed at me with their teeth. David here praying to the Lord, and he's saying, Lord, I didn't do anything bad to them. I didn't do anything to deserve their attack. In fact, I did the opposite. I prayed for health when they were sick. I mourned when they were sick. I treated them like brothers, like friends. I fasted for them. I prayed for them. Some of these men were more than likely men that David had once led when he was on good terms with Saul, when he led him into war, into battles. They were men that David had fought with, risked his life for, people that he loved. And he says to God, I've treated them with nothing but love and care. And they have done what? They have returned good with evil. They have returned my good with evil. Job was also blameless in his suffering. Noah was blameless in a world that was perverted and destroying itself. And ultimately, Christ was blameless on a cross. Part of the reason that David was able to from a place of conviction and without remorse pray for the destructions of his enemies is because he was blameless in their sight. I think sometimes we're too quick to be like, oh, that person, they're my enemy. Or we're too quick to assume like, oh, I'm blameless in that situation. Because we know that David has also been known for praying, Lord, search my heart. See if there's any evil and wicked ways in me. David was a man that was blameless because he knew that God was his protector. He knew that God had a mission for him. He knew that he was God's anointed one. This picture that's developing is not of people that have simply offended David or hurt his feelings or said something mean to him or pushed his buttons. I had a teacher in Bible college, and her name was Mama Robin. She was a character in a good way, a very good way. But she was like very black and white, like no. I remember one time she came and she taught at the beginning of each semester. They'd split the boys and girls up, and they'd have a split chapel where they would, tell the boys like, don't be stupid, and the girls like, leave the boys alone. Don't like. They'd tell both of them like, no funny business, right? Like, don't be silly, don't get kicked out. And Mama Robin came and she shared for us, and she put the fear of God in us. I'll tell you that. Room full of men and boys, but a room full of boys. And she got up there and she just laid it into us and was like, oh God, it was awesome. It was cool. But one time I heard her say this, and I probably abused this a little too much. But I said to her, man, this person is just really pushing my buttons. And she said, well, that's your problem. You shouldn't have buttons to push. And I was like, oh, So now whenever I push Rachel's buttons, I say, you shouldn't have buttons to push, babe. That does not end well. It does not end well for me. But I really like that, because the less we get offended, the better. Right? These aren't people that just offended David. They weren't people that just pushed his buttons and he's like, oh, I'm so offended at you. No, these are people that were seeking his life. They were quite literally trying to throw spears at him. And so David continues. In verse 17, we see that he's kind of restless. He says, Lord, how long will you look on me? Rescue me from their destruction, my precious life from the lions. How many of us have felt that before? A little bit of restlessness? Lord, you promised. And for David, it was even more severe. He was anointed king years before this. And he had to wait. Think about that. Imagine if you had been anointed king of Israel by Samuel, one of the greatest prophets, and he anointed, like Samuel came to your house and he anointed you, and you had to then wait and wait. Then you had to live with the guy that you knew you were replacing and wait and wait and wait. You killed a giant, you delivered a bunch of people and had all this, you did all this stuff. And it was clear, like, I'm supposed to be, and you had to wait and wait. And David's getting restless. And again, just like the doubt, it's okay for us to get a little restless. It's okay for us to feel like, I don't know how I feel. I just want it to be over. That's normal. That means you're human, right? And I'll be honest, this one hits me pretty deep right now. Because personally in my life, there's people that have done me wrong that I can say I'm blameless in front of. And I just want them to do the right thing. But they won't. And it's almost been a year. And it affects me mentally. It affects my family. And I was like, yeah, Lord, I get that. Like, please, Lord, what do I need to do? And you know what I got? Nothing. Quiet. Still. But again, you have to love David's honesty. He's not trying to pretend that he's got it all together. He's like, no, Lord, I don't want this to go on. Remove it. Jesus prayed the same thing. Remove this cup from me if possible. We should expect when we're facing trials like David was facing that we're going to be a little restless sometimes. And how do we combat that? Verse 18 says, I will give you thanks in the great assembly. I will praise you among many people. What he's saying here is he's saying, when you deliver me from these, when you deliver me from my enemies, I'll shout it out from the rooftops. I'll get on Facebook and I'll post all about it. I've got a great example of this. If you're not following Jonna on Facebook, you should. Because anytime the Lord delivers her from anything, no matter how small it is or how silly people might think it is, you best believe she gives like a paragraph long talking about how the Lord has delivered her from it. No matter if it's a little cough or a major surgery she had. She treats them all the same. And it came to me, I was like, yeah, that's that. She's just praising Lord for delivering her from anything. And that's what David says. He says, I will publicly praise you for delivering me. Not just in secret, but in front of everybody. But what he's doing in this moment is he's looking forward to that time where he'll get to do that. So instead of sitting there and dwelling on his restlessness, he's looking forward to the victory that he has faith that he knows God will bring him. It's really hard to do that. I'll be completely honest. It's really hard to look forward to the victory that you don't yet see. But it's a lot easier if you kind of take a step back and you start to remember the victories that God has already given you. God has given us lots of victory in life. He's delivered us all individually from different things. We all have countless stories of how God has helped us. And if you haven't, then I would encourage you that you can. You can by putting your faith in Jesus. You can experience that joy. You can go on Facebook and post about how the Lord has delivered you. But it helps when we look back and we see, man, the Lord has been faithful. He has been good to me. He has taken care of me. I'm sure that David was thinking that the fact that I'm even standing here, probably in a cave, alive, is a testimony that God has taken care of me. And so David, he now kind of changes again in this next section, 19 through the end of the chapter. He's praying for vindication. in in chapter, I forgot, my notes got messed up. I forgot the 8. What he's praying for in this first section is he's praying for justice. In verse 19, it says here, let them not rejoice over me who are wrongfully my enemies. They shouldn't be my enemies. We already discussed that. Nor let them wink with the eye who hate me without cause. For they do not speak peace, but they devise deceitful matters against the quiet ones in the land. They also opened their mouth wide against me and said, aha, aha, our eyes have seen it. This you have seen, O Lord. Do not keep silent. O Lord, do not be far from me. David is praying that the Lord vindicate him from the evil acts of his enemies. Because not only are they slandering David, but they're also slandering the quiet ones. Again, that was those humble people that, you could imagine in a town in Jerusalem, and there was people that, not Jerusalem yet, but there was people in their town that were desiring to have David, and they were kind of just minding their own business, and those people were also being slandered. Those people they were also attacking just for being associated with David. David's prayer for justice wasn't simply about himself, but for all that were affected by the evil that was meant for him. Part of what made David such a good king is he cared about his people. He was a shepherd boy. He killed a lion for his sheep. I don't know about you. If I saw a lion and I had a sheep, I'm saying sheep, sorry, good luck. I don't got to outrun the lion. I just got to outrun you. And I think I can beat a sheep still. I think so. Right? But David cared about his sheep. And he's like, I'm going to go get that lion. I'll go get that bear. He cared about the quiet ones. And we should too. We should care about those who won't speak up or cannot speak up. In Proverbs 31, verse 8 through 9, it says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless and see that they get justice. We've all been there. We've all heard it. Most of us, I'm assuming pretty much everyone here went to school. Gary didn't make it through, but he went there. He tried. Gave it his best. I love you, Gary. But we went to school. And I can't tell you how many times in school you're with friends and there's certain kids that aren't popular or people don't like or whatever it is. And people are always making fun of them and making fun of that kid. And, do you see what they wore to school or what they had or blah, blah, whatever it is. Because high schoolers are really mean. And David's kind of talking about that, right? Speak up for those who are quiet, who are just minding their own business. The innocent in this world. We can all think of people like that in our lives. He continues in verse 22. This you have seen, O Lord, meaning you have seen my heart, you have seen my actions. Do not keep silent, O Lord. Do not be far from me. Stir up yourself and wake to my vindication, to my cause, my God and my Lord. Vindicate me, O Lord, my God, according to your righteousness. And let them not rejoice over me. Let them not say in their hearts, so we would have it. Let them not say, we have swallowed him up. Let them be ashamed and brought to mutual confusion. Who rejoice at my hurt. Let them be clothed with shame and dishonor who exalt themselves against me. David is praying to God now, you know my heart. You know I'm blameless. You know that they're repaying good for evil. You've seen it. So wake up. Bring justice to my name. Bring justice to my people. I think oftentimes in our lives, we find moments where we feel like we need to defend ourselves. I'm just going to get on Facebook and I'm going to let that person know. I'm going to get in the comments and I'm going to let them know. This is a blue dress, not a teal dress. Or whatever it is. You feel like you need to defend yourself. That was a good one. You can laugh, it's fine. That's not in my notes either. That was off my... The last minute changes are good, Derek. But we find ourselves in similar situations. But what we need to do, instead of trying to defend ourselves, is to allow God to do it. In Deuteronomy, God made it clear that vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So much so that in Romans, Paul quotes it, telling the people to give room for God to handle it. Give room for God to handle it. Vengeance is His. Again, David is getting a little restless and he's praying, Lord, do not keep silent. You've seen my innocence. You've seen the people hurting. Vengeance is yours. He again prays in verse 27, let them shout for joy and be glad, who favor my righteous cause, and let them say continually, let the Lord be magnified, who has pleasure in the prosperity of his servant. And my tongue shall speak of your righteousness and of your praise all the day long. The them in this is the people the quiet ones, the people that were supporting David. When you deliver me from my enemies, Lord, when you deliver the people from my enemies, let them shout for joy. Let them be glad. And let them say continually, Lord, be magnified. David's response to being delivered was one of magnifying God. This is the correct response in our life. The word prosperity, it actually translates to shalom, which is peace. David's desire is for peace in his life, for peace in his people's life. And what he's praying is that, Lord, when you deliver me, although it's hard to see the end right now, although it's hard to focus on the good, I doubt sometimes, but Lord, give me peace. And if you give me peace, I will glorify you. And the people will glorify you. So can we as Christians pray curses over our enemies? I think the answer is yes, but there's an if or a but. If you can do it like David did it. First and most importantly, right, I think that his enemies were not just his enemies, right? These were enemies against God. These were people trying to destroy what God was trying to do. They were not people that just offended him and hurt him. They were really against God, not David. And sometimes we'll find ourselves in that situation when we're like, why are people, what did I do? And they're not really attacking you, but they're attacking what you believe or what you stand for. Second is you have to be blameless. Like David, you need a prayer for the Lord to seek your heart, to search it, to know it, to reveal any wicked and evil ways in you. You yourself must be blameless before God and before man. The third thing is once you pray this, you have to leave it to God. You have to allow God to do it. Notice, nowhere did David really tell him, do this. Do it this way. This is how I want you to do it, God. Oftentimes our prayer is like, Lord, deliver me from this trial and do it. This is what I need. Instead of, Lord, deliver me from your trial, in only ways that you can do. David had the chance to end his suffering. In 1 Samuel 24:10, it says, "Look this day, your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you today into my hands in the cave. And someone urged me to kill you." This is David talking to Saul. "But my eyes spared you, and I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." David had an opportunity to take it into his own hands. He had an opportunity to end his suffering the way he wanted it done, the way everybody wanted it done, and he had people on his side encouraging him to do so. But he didn't. He continued to put his faith in God and allow God to do it his way. And so that's the proper way that we handle our enemies. But the cool thing about this chapter is it also is a really good picture. It's a phenomenal picture of Jesus. In verse 19 specifically, if you look at that one verse, "Let them not rejoice over me who are wrongfully my enemies, nor let them wink with an eye who hate me without cause." Without cause. David at this moment in his life didn't know it, but he was a picture. He was a precursor of what Christ would go through. The really only true blameless one who could honestly say, "I haven't sinned, yet I am facing punishment. I haven't sinned, yet my blood is going to cover all." It's a picture of Jesus. David's heart is a picture of Jesus. He's quite often a type of Jesus. We get to look at his life and say, man, he went before, but that's what Jesus fulfilled. He was a better version. Because David still sinned, he still struggled, he still screwed up. But there's so many blessings in this psalm for David. The fact that he's even able to pray for protection from his enemies. He's able to pray to God to protect him, to deliver him, to bless him, is all because he's a child of God. Because his faith was in God. His faith was in Jesus before it even happened. And when Jesus died, it was accredited to him as righteousness. It was given to him. We should strive to have a heart like David, that understood that he needed to allow God to work. Had faith in God in all the troubles that we go through. Because like I said, we all go through troubles. We all have trials. This was a pretty big trial in David's life. And I'm sure that you guys are going through trials that you would consider is also a pretty big trial in your life. I wish I could say that they went away, but they probably aren't going to until Jesus comes again. But we can still have victory amongst those trials. We can still have deliverance through Jesus. And I can't tell you how many times where it's like we struggle, we want it our way, and then God's just like, "Are you ready? Okay, let's do it my way and see how that works." And if you haven't put your faith in Jesus, and you're going through trials and it seems like they're never going to end, and you're like, why do these people have joy? Why can they sing? Why? It's because our faith is in something greater than us. You see, when your faith isn't in Jesus, it's in yourself. You're saying, I can do it. I can get to heaven on my own. And God's saying, okay, we'll see. But I'm going to be here waiting for you. So I would encourage you, if that's you, to see one of the elders, pray with them. If any of you are going through any trials, that's why they stand up on the sides. They want to pray with you. They want to comfort you. They want to encourage you. But let's be like David right now and let's sing praises to God.